דרכיך, דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם.
You may be seated. Just 2 nights ago, we as a community joined together to celebrate the Pesach Seder. We sang, asked questions, read page after page after page, and ate some delicious food. My favorite was the cake. And for those who stayed through until the end, we did something a little bit weird. As a child, I vividly remember watching Sesame Street and finding the character of the Count kind of amusing. But I think he would have felt quite at home as we began our annual practice of counting the Omer, Sefirat HaOmer. This mitzvah is enjoined upon us in the book of Leviticus, which we read yesterday morning, and it somewhat unclearly says, Usfartem lechem mimuchorat haShabbat, and you shall count for yourselves from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the Omer of the wave offering. 7 complete Sabbaths shall there be. To the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you shall number 50 days. What we can glean, pun intended, is that we are commanded to count 7 weeks of 7 days, leading us from our redemption in Egypt to the formation of our people at Mount Sinai on Shavuot. It is less clear when we actually are to begin the counting, as the apocryphal text of Jubilees demonstrates, but suffice it to say, the rabbis taught that we begin this counting on the 2nd night of Pesach at the 2nd Seder here in the diaspora. But what is the reason for this counting? As if the count ever needs a reason to count. As is the case, the original reasoning has to do with the agricultural cycle. With Pesach, our ancestors in the land of Egypt, and still to this very day, began the agricultural year. Around the time of Passover, they harvested the first crop of barley, and approximately some 49 days later, they were able to harvest wheat. As such, the Omer, literally this sheaf offering, was brought after a successful harvest in gratitude for the abundance of food and for the land. But in part due to the realities of living in diaspora and living here in Vermont, where we're only just now getting some warmth, where the agricultural cycles could vary quite greatly, this counting began to take on a more spiritual meaning. As I mentioned earlier, this 49-day period leads us from the redemption of Pesach to the giving of Torah at Sinai. The mystics teach that these 7 weeks of 7 days are a spiritual journey from the freedom of that moment of connection with God and our people, and much like the journey of our ancestors in the wilderness towards Sinai. Utilizing the 7 lower Sefirot, yes, I'm getting into Kabbalah, among the 10 aspects of the divine consciousness described by the Kabbalists, one can move through this period towards a greater sense of spiritual freedom. In fact, the very word for these divine aspects, Sefirot, is etymologically related to the word for counting, Sephira, both having a meaning of counting or describing. These 10 Sefirot to describe personality traits that we can work in our lives to embody. Chesed, loving kindness. Gevura, power. Tiferet, beauty. Netzach, endurance. Hod, splendor. Yesod, foundation. And Malchut, royalty. Each of the 7 weeks of the Omer, we focus on one of these traits. Loving kindness, splendor, endurance, and so on. But even more so, each day, we focus on how this main trait of that week interacts with these others, so that the loving kindness found in power, the royalty found in endurance, and so on and so forth. And so, throughout the 49 days of the HaOmer, we have the opportunity to slow down and reflect on how we embody these traits in our lives and our relationships. Last night, we counted the second night, Gevura Shebachesed, the power that can be found in loving kindness. As we count through these coming days and weeks, I invite you to join me in this journey. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about this process. And join me in counting today is 2 days of the HaOmer. If you would like to join me after Kiddush, we will be learning in the small sanctuary. We'll be learning about the HaOmer and the blessing that is recited upon this, and what you do if you miss a day, 2 days, or you miss the entire period and get to the last day. Do you say the blessing or not? Shabbat Shalom, and may you have a sweet Pesach.